When I think of Nintendo's Super Famicom or Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the first thing that comes to mind is a no-brainer. Its amazing library of games. People like myself who spent a large majority of their childhood with the system definitely had their favorites growing up. Super Mario World, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Super Castlevania 4, Chrono Trigger, some of the all-time classics. My own favorite SNES game at the time, however, was one that often gets undeservedly left off the list of 16-bit greats, at least in the West, Konami's quirky Japanese action-adventure game, The Legend of the Mystical Ninja. Its colorful cast of heroes and villains, crisp and vivid 16-bit graphics, catchy soundtrack, and fantastic co-op gameplay hooked me in from my very first play session, and kept me hooked for many years on. I didn't know it at the time, but this game set in a strange, fantastical Far Eastern world starring a young, heroic ninja named Kid Ying and his fat, goofy friend Dr. Yang, was actually the Western debut of a popular video game series from Japan. And the heroes of the series were no Kid Ying and Dr. Yang at all, but instead the decidedly more Japanese-flavored Goemon and Ibisumaru, which I learned several years later from the second big international release, Mystical Ninja starring Goemon for the N64. I loved that game so much that I decided then to look a bit more into the Mystical Ninja series, or Ganbare Goemon as it's properly called, and thanks to the rising popularity of the internet in the late 90s, this was quite easy to do. I was absolutely astounded to discover just how many games of the franchise were developed in the years between the Super Nintendo and N64 titles I was already familiar with, and even more shocked when I discovered that The Legend of the Mystical Ninja wasn't even close to being the first Ganbare Goemon, just the first to be published on Nintendo's 16-bit system, a continuation in a long-running series. Like many of Konami's other notable gaming IPs, Ganbare Goemon can trace its roots all the way back to the golden age of the arcade with Mr. Goemon. This Japan-exclusive quarter muncher, yen muncher, that first hit the Game Center scene in May of 1986, is a simple side-scrolling action platformer starring the titular Goemon, based on the outlaw folk hero Goemon Ishikawa, often referred to as the Japanese Robin Hood. While Ishikawa is an actual figure from history, the exact circumstances of his life are unknown due to a lack of records and the many differing stories chronicling his life as popularized in traditional kabuki theater, but he's generally known as a man who lived in the twilight years of the Sengoku Jirai, or Warring States period, and was a skilled thief who stole from the ruling and merchant classes, gave his loot to the poor, was said to be skilled in the ninjutsu arts, and was implicated in a failed assassination attempt on prominent samurai warlord Hideyoshi Toyotomi, for which he was captured and boiled alive in a public execution. The style of the game reflects the kabuki aesthetic associated with the tales of the legendary Goemon, especially in regards to the protagonist, whose appearance matches up well with those of the many traditional ukiyo-e portraits of popular actors who portrayed Ishikawa in theater. The levels are structured much like a kabuki performance as well, with the drum rolls, curtains, and other elements heavily associated with it used all throughout. The setup for the game is as follows. As the renowned thief Goemon is on the run, scattering his stolen koban coins for the masses to collect along the way, he suddenly decides that he wants to aim for a bigger prize, the golden Shachihoko tiger carp ornament that adorns the roof of Edo Castle, and makes haste toward his goal while avoiding capture and death by those who stand before him and his object of desire. The perilous path to this golden statue is spread out over 4 stages and littered with enemies and traps along the way. Each level is split into 2 sections, and it's a race against the clock, represented here by a moon, to get to a middle and end goal area. The game has a very simple single joystick and 2-button control scheme. Pushing the joystick left and right will move Goemon, pushing up will make him jump, and pushing down lets him descend to a lower level. There are a lot of items scattered about each stage, such as Manekineko Lucky Cats and Shamisen fans, which can be collected one at a time and thrown with the press of a button to knock out enemies, with the other button reserved for Goemon's trusty close-range Kiseru pipe attack. A majority of foes will try to capture the outlaw outright, and when they grab on, simply wiggling the joystick will shake them off. Other enemies, such as ninjas, will toss projectile weapons that kill Goemon in one hit, and Goemon can jump on the heads of his would-be captors to knock them down a level and get a bit of extra airtime to boot. Traps, such as tsunami waves and water pits, will also pose a mortal threat to the hero. As mentioned earlier, there are 2 sections to each level. The first half ends when Goemon reaches a stack of gold coin boxes, which can be jumped over and add to the player's score depending on the box collected. The second half of a level concludes with a boss encounter, Naijin, the Thunder God, on stage 1. Wig-tossing goons based off the famous print created by ukiyo-e master Sharaku on the second stage, several flying Tengu deities on the third, and in the final stage, iterations of Kannon, the Buddhist goddess of mercy. In stages 1 to 3, making it past the boss clears the level, and Goemon tosses his coins through the streets to share his newfound wealth with the poor. Upon completion of level 4, Goemon nabs the Shachihoko statue he had been seeking all along, and the player can continue playing the game from the first stage but on a harder difficulty and add to his high score, which was something very common for games of the era. While Mr. Goemon starts off with an incredibly easy first stage, the difficulty spikes quite a bit around the end of the second stage, and it takes skill, dedication, and luck to get through the initial 4 stages without dying multiple times, as you would imagine for an arcade title. For a fan of the Ganbare Goemon games, it's very much worth trying out this game at least once, since it's so interesting to see just where and how the series got its start, as well as all the visual and audio elements that would be used in its sequels for decades to come. In its prime, Mr. Goemon never got a proper home port, nor is it available in any sort of compilation disc, but it was made available as a digital download on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 4, and it's almost guaranteed it will make its way to other platforms in the future. Following the tumultuous Warring States period, the Edo period ushered in an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity for the island nation of Japan, which lasted nearly 3 centuries. With clan warfare coming to an end, the rulers of Japan, feudal lords in service of the shogun known as daimyo, enjoyed undisturbed, lavish lives of luxury. But in the absence of conflict, they lost focus of their responsibilities in governing, and the people suffered greatly as their leaders became lost in selfish pursuits. Goemon, fabled thief and hero of the common man, vows to travel across the different prefectures of Japan to confront the feudal lords, and convince them to change their ways, taking his revolution all the way to the front door of the shogun's castle, or die trying. This is the premise of the first game to bear the Ganbare Goemon name that would be released just a couple of months after Mr. Goemon's arcade debut, Karakuri Douchuu for the Nintendo Family Computer. Rather than a straightforward platformer, Karakuri Douchuu, which can be translated as something like The Tricky Path, is a non-linear action game, which judged by the standards of the era, is housed in a hefty 2MB cartridge. But despite this big change-up in the formula, Karakuri Douchuu doesn't forget where it comes from, and recycles as well as builds upon the art direction, musical style, and gameplay elements introduced by its predecessor. Many of the items and enemies from the arcade game make a return, and while Goemon's appearance has been altered a bit, probably in large part due to the hardware downgrade, it's still based on traditional Japanese art aesthetics. It would take several more major releases down the line in the Ganbare Goemon series until its protagonist would don the red cheeks and spiky blue hair he's known for today. His depictions before then varied quite a bit. Take a look at this magazine guide for the game and its funky Goemon. I kinda like it. Game progression involves gathering 3 gate passes in each stage using a variety of different means in order to move on to the next level, where the process repeats itself until the final 2 stages, in which the goal is to simply reach a goal area. On the tricky path, you'll fight off tons of enemy characters who no longer attempt to capture the thief alive, collect items such as gold coins and power-ups, shop in stores to buy things such as protective armor and gate passes, and play a minigame or 2 as well. Ganbare Goemon Karakuri Douchuu is one of the quintessential 8-bit classics in Japan, and is basically one of the games synonymous with the Famicom there. So much so that it even made its way to the Famicom mini collection on the Game Boy Advance, among other greats as Super Mario Bros. And The Adventure of Link, and has been made available in so many digital forms, so this one Japan-exclusive Konami game has left behind quite the legacy, And because of that, information on the game can be found anywhere and everywhere it seems. So there's not really much I can add from here on that wouldn't potentially be a redundant retelling of what's already been said 100 times before. That's why instead of focusing on Ganbare Goemon Karakuri Douchuu for the Famicom, I'll turn my attention to Ganbare Goemon Karakuri Douchuu. For the MSX2 computer system, that is. In the 1980s, Konami was one of several video game companies that really made owning a Nintendo system worth it, as it produced some of the Famicom's greatest titles. But Konami wasn't just solely focused on Nintendo machines at the time. They also heavily threw their weight into the MSX and MSX2 lines of personal computers, which would often get radically altered in unique ports of their Famicom and arcade offerings. And that's exactly what happened with the first Ganbare Goemon game. Released on February 25, 1987, Karakuri Douchuu for the MSX2 follows roughly the same premise as the original and features similar gameplay and game progression, but has been rebuilt completely from the ground up to fit its new platform. The title screen presents two ways to play the game, giving it your all in single player, or enjoying the game with another person in two-player mode. The Famicom original also had turn-based co-op gameplay, though both players were limited to only using Goemon. In this version, however, use of Goemon is reserved exclusively for player 1, and the second player assumes the role of the ninja thief's wacky, lovable partner in crime and justice. That's right, fan favorite, Nezumi Kozo? What happened to Ebisumaru? This guy sure bears a striking resemblance though. The truth is, this Nezumi Kozo guy is Ebisumaru. Well, the very first iteration of the Ganbare Goemon series is funny, fat, and freaky sidekick, anyway. Just as Goemon's character was inspired by a Robin Hood-like Japanese folk hero, so too was Ebisumaru's. While his exploits are not quite as sung on high as Goemon Ishikawa's, Nezumi Kozo, or roughly the Rat Kid, was the alias of Jirokichi Nakamura, a master thief who lived in the 1800s during Japan's Edo period, the time in which the Ganbare Goemon universe is loosely set. Like Ishikawa, Nezumi Kozo was eventually caught and executed for his crimes, meeting a slightly more merciful end than the former, as he was beheaded rather than boiled alive. Looking at popular depictions of the famous thief, it's crystal clear as to where certain elements of Ebisumaru's character design came from. The story in Karakuri Douchuu for the Famicom and MSX2 is mostly identical, except with the latter adding Goemon's great rival and partner, Nezumi Kozo, into the mix, and his introduction here was used as a big part of the game's marketing. Goemon vs Nezumi Kozo, bring forth a revolution. He even got himself a little moniker phrase similar to his co-star, Ganbare Goemon, makeru na Nezumi Kozo, go for it Goemon, never lose Nezumi Kozo. All music tracks are the same in both versions, though with slightly altered sounds because of the different chips used for the systems. However, the Famicom version has one extra jingle from a cutscene not included in the MSX2 game. Gameplay and game progression in the MSX2 Karakuri Douchuu are also nearly identical to its Famicom counterpart. But even at first glance, one of the big differences between the two is quite apparent. The graphics have gotten a pretty big upgrade on its move over to the PC, which displays larger sprites and uses a much brighter, attractive color palette, and the visuals are just more eye-pleasing overall. However, that's just one of a handful of examples where the MSX2 Karakuri Douchuu improves on its source material, and most differences between it and the Famicom game aren't so positive, which are the result of hardware limitations and the reduction in cartridge size from 2 MB to just 1. The Famicom game's levels are divided up into many different large areas that would scroll left or right, but probably due to the difficulty of achieving smooth screen scrolling on the MSX2, every game area in this version is a static single screen, and there's no scrolling whatsoever. Goemon could move in 8 directions in his first Famicom journey, but in this port, control is limited to just up, down, left, and right. Karakuri Douchuu on the Famicom is also characterized by its relatively speedy pace. This is not the case for the MSX2 game, as Goemon and his enemies are quite sluggish in comparison, giving the two titles a distinctly different feel to their gameplay. The game is slow enough, but using the MSX's built-in slow mode, you can lower the game speed even further if desired for some reason. Despite those changes, however, the controls of the game remain largely unchanged. Since MSX machines have a keyboard built into their design, that is used to play by default. However, like most action titles on the system, joystick and joypad support is included. One button is used to attack and the other to jump, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Jumping over pots will add to the money pool, and jumping over boxes will cause either a Hyotoko mask or Lucky Cat to spring out in the opposite direction of where the player lands. Collecting the mask will give the hero a pair of sandals that can be stacked up to 3 times, which exponentially increases his moving speed and jumping distance. And picking up the Lucky Cat replaces the short-ranged melee weapon with a long-range slingshot, which shoots up to 2 projectiles at a time that travel across the entire game screen. The F1 key serves as the pause button, and pressing F2 while paused will give you a password that can be generated only once per stage, so you can continue your journey in case you quit the game or run out of lives, a newly added feature to the MSX2 Karakuri Douchuu. Where to input these passwords is a bit of a mystery without the manual because there is no password option at the start screen, and it's accessed by pressing Control on the keyboard. Running out of lives sends you back to the title screen, and you'll have to start all the way back from the beginning, so it's important to take note of passwords often. The goal of most levels is the same as before. Collect 3 gate passes, pass through the gate, and it's on to the next stage. Gate passes can be bought at shops, but there are 2 other ways of obtaining them. One is by paying a fee to participate in a sort of minigame that shifts the perspective to a first-person view, and requires Goemon or Nezumi Kozo to navigate the halls of a pseudo 3D maze. This is a carryover from the Famicom edition, and it's not just a gate pass that can be collected in these labyrinths. You can also collect a map, which can make navigation much easier, money boxes that contain 200 koban a pop, and occasionally Oiri Bukuro, which adds to the player's stock of lives. The final method of acquiring gate passes is discovering them in secret underground tunnels, the entrances to which are revealed by jumping around on the overworld. Just like with the 3D mazes, other items can be found in these underground passages, such as money boxes, 1-up items, sandals, and slingshots. But there are also dango mochi dumplings that replenish lost HP, and the much coveted gourds that will increase the HP bar permanently. Most of the items and enemies from the Famicom game make their way over to this port, but a few have been omitted, such as the hammer power-up that made Goemon invincible and able to take down any foe he touches, and the annoying baddies who would capture Goemon if he jumped into their mobile cart, return him to the start of the stage, and charge him for the supposed service. At shops, you can buy sandals and slingshots like those found out in the field, food items to restore hit points, hourglass timers to add to the stage time limit, rice balls to completely refill the health bar when it reaches 0, and all sorts of different pieces of armor and accessories to protect the heroes from specific types of attacks up to 5 times. Samurai armor protects from projectiles. A Kabuto samurai helmet protects against stage hazards such as falling rocks. The Indo, or traditional Japanese carrying case, defends against normal enemy attacks. The Mamori charm negates damage from flying and jumping enemies, and Sandokasa umbrella hats prevent damage from bird droppings. You can also buy a candle which will reveal all the secret entrances to the underground areas for a limited time, and there are inns that provide yet another method of replenishing the health bar. The final item which can be obtained is exclusive to the MSX2 edition of Karakuri Douchuu, and is perhaps the most important of all, an Oyabun no Shoujo, or the Chief's Letter. Without this, most shop owners will refuse to do business with you, and some that don't will price hike their goods and services considerably. But when in possession of this document, you're welcomed by all, and given great bargains from store owners. For example, the very first maze in the game requires a whopping 900 koban to enter, which will take a long time to save up, given that in most cases, only 5 or 10 koban is rewarded for taking out a foe. Provide proof of the chief's approval, however, and the fee to run through the maze is reduced to a much more reasonable 50 koban. There are different ways of acquiring this introductory letter, but thankfully, it's possible to get one at the very beginning of the game with a little bit of grinding. Just talk to this man here twice with more than 300 koban in your possession each time, and he'll hand over the letter on a 3rd meeting. It's hard to stress just how much less stress you'll have on the tricky path because of the Oyabun no Shoujo. Just don't die, because it will disappear if you do. Goemon's journey starts off in Izumo Prefecture, which is divided up into 7 stages that are all unique. But in general, there are 4 different types of stages in Karakuri Douchuu: classic Edo-era urban towns, rural forest villages, rocky mountains, and Sunny Island vistas, with the latter two being home to many insta-death pitfalls. The final two areas in a prefecture take place on the outside and inside of the palace of the feudal lord, and forego the gate pass mechanic altogether, instead requiring the player to simply reach a goal to complete the level. First, the gate of the palace, and ultimately, the feudal lord's personal chambers. These stages contain the most aggressive and dangerous foes in the entire game, making the tricky path that much trickier. Finally reaching the end of this perilous road in the hidden chambers of the daimyo, the confrontation results in great success, as the lord sees the error of his ways and vows to govern properly from here on out. In the Famicom version, after this you're treated to a brief cutscene, and the game resumes in a different prefecture for the process to begin anew, though you'll have to replay all of the same levels again, only on a slightly more difficult setting with faster moving enemies. And you'll have to clear all 8 prefectures to see the true ending, meaning 8 full playthroughs of progressively increasing difficulty. In the MSX2 version, there are no victory cutscenes. No cutscenes at all, really, as the intro for the Famicom game is also absent. At least the end stage coin tossing bits are still around. There are also only 7 prefectures to clear to truly beat the game, with a total of 49 standard stages, less than its Famicom counterpart. However, instead of just replaying the game over and over again, each and every stage is different from the next, giving it more value than its predecessor. The final stages are set in Edo, and upon reaching the Shogun, you get the true ending, which is unfortunately just white text on a black screen that states that the lords have learned their lesson, and that the plight of the people has come to an end. But for how long? In total, it will take about 40 minutes or so to complete any one prefecture, and if you're a madman and want to take your game all the way to Edo, expect the tricky path to last at least several hours. Compared to the Famicom original, Ganbare Goemon Karakuri Douchuu is a bit of an easier experience on the MSX2, as long as you don't die and lose the chief's letter in one of the more chaotic areas of the game, as it will be nearly impossible to recover if you do, since you lose your speed and weapon power-ups as well. You can adjust the number of lives and prefectures in the game by using a special cartridge Konami produced for the MSX called the Konami no Game wo 10 倍楽しむ cartridge, which purports to make your Konami games on the system 10 times more fun. You can access such options by inserting this cartridge in slot 2 of the MSX unit. And another bonus of using this card is having the ability to stop the game and run things frame by frame. Not really the most impressive of options, but it's better than nothing. And the cartridge can be used with so much more of Konami's expansive library of MSX titles. According to GameFAQs, inserting Konami's MSX version of Q*bert in the second cart slot will allow you to input cheat codes, but since I don't have that game, I can't test it out for myself. Well, that's a bit on the origins of the beloved Ganbare Goemon series and Karakuri Douchuu for the MSX2. The early games in the series can sometimes get a bad rap from people who didn't grow up playing them, even fans of Ganbare Goemon who are coming from some of the later games. But I think Karakuri Douchuu and Mr. Goemon are fun, excellent games that I would recommend to anyone, whether they've played a Ganbare Goemon before or not. They're really a reflection of what gaming was like at the time, while simultaneously withstanding the test of time. Though the state of Ganbare Goemon today is at an undeniable low point, there are a few rays of hope for the future of the series, here and there. And as far as what the future will bring for it, I'm not sure. But I do know of a future for Ganbare Goemon that once was and could have been more. But I'll save that for another time. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching this episode of Import Gaming for the Win, and I hope to add another Goemon game to the IGFTW roster soon. Until then, this is Jimmy Hapa. Te ande! Take care.